There's just a way of talking that's like snarky and so on that somehow gets people on Twitter and they get excited and so on.
You have like ad hominem refuting the central point. I've like seen this as an actual pyramid somewhere.
Yeah, it's like all of it, all the wrong stuff is attractive to people.
I mean, we can just train a classifier to absolutely say what level of Maslow's hierarchy of argument are you at.
Yeah.
And if it's ad hominem, like, okay, cool. I turned on the no ad hominem filter.
I wonder if there's a social network that will allow you to have that kind of filter.
Yeah. So here's a problem with that. It's not going to win in a free market.
Yeah.
What wins in a free market is all television today is reality television because it's engaging. Right? If engaging is what wins in a free market, right? So it becomes hard to keep these other more nuanced values.
Well, okay, so that's the experience of being on Twitter, but then you got a chance to also, together with other engineers and with Elon, sort of brainstorm when you step into a code base that's been around for a long time. There's other social networks, Facebook, this is old code bases. And you step in and see, okay, how do we make, with a fresh mind, progress on this code base? Like, what did you learn about software engineering, about programming from just experiencing that?
So my technical recommendation to Elon, and I said this on the Twitter Spaces afterward, I said this many times during my brief internship, was that you need refactors before features. This code base was, and look, I've worked at Google, I've worked at Facebook. Facebook has the best code, then Google, then Twitter. And you know what? You can know this because look at the machine learning frameworks, right? Facebook released PyTorch, Google released TensorFlow, and Twitter released... okay, so,
it's a proxy, but yeah, the Google code base is quite interesting. There's a lot of really good software engineers there, but the code base is very large.
The code base was good in 2005, right? It looks like 2005 era.
There's so many products, so many teams, right? It's very difficult to... I feel like Twitter does less, like obviously much less than Google in terms of like the set of features, right? So like I can imagine the number of software engineers that could recreate Twitter is much smaller than to recreate Google.
Yeah, I still believe, and the amount of hate I got for saying this, that 50 people could build and maintain Twitter. Pretty.
What's the nature of the hate?
Comfortably.
That you don't know what you're talking about?
You know what it is? And it's the same. This is my summary of like the hate I get on Hacker News. It's like when I say I'm going to do something, they have to believe that it's impossible.
Yeah.
Because if doing things was possible, they'd have to do some soul searching and ask the question, why didn't they do anything?
So when you say...
And I do think that's where the hate comes from.
When you say, well, there's a core truth to that, yeah. So when you say I'm going to solve self-driving, people go like, what are your credentials? What the hell are you talking about? This is an extremely difficult problem. Of course, you're a noob that doesn't understand the problem deeply. I mean, that was the same nature of hate that probably Elon got when he first talked about autonomous driving. But, there's pros and cons to that because, like, there is experts in this world.
No, but the mockers aren't experts. The people who are mocking are not experts with carefully reasoned arguments about why you need 8,000 people to run a bird app. But the people are going to lose their jobs.
Well, but also there's the software engineers that probably criticize, no, it's a lot more complicated than you realize, but maybe it doesn't need to be so complicated.
Some people in the world like to create complexity. Some people in the world thrive under complexity, like lawyers, right? Lawyers want the world to be more complex because you need more lawyers, you need more legal hours, right? I think that's another. If there's two great evils in the world, it's centralization and complexity.
Yeah, and the one of the sort of hidden side effects of software engineering is like finding pleasure in complexity. I mean, I don't remember just taking all the software engineering courses and just doing programming and this is just coming up in this object-oriented programming kind of idea. You don't like. Not often do people tell you like do the simplest possible thing. Like a professor, a teacher is not going to get in front like this is the simplest way to do it. They'll say like this is there's the right way, and the right way, at least for a long time, especially I came up with like Java, right? Like is there's so much boilerplate, so much like so many classes, so many like designs and architectures and so on, like planning for features far into the future and planning poorly and all this kind of stuff. And then there's this like code base that follows you along and puts pressure on you, and nobody knows what like different parts do, which slows everything down. There's a kind of bureaucracy that's instilled in the code as a result of that. But then you feel like, oh, well, I follow good software engineering practices. It's an interesting trade-off, because then you look at like the ghetto-ness of like Perl and the old, like how quickly you could just write a couple lines and just get stuff done. That trade-off is interesting, or Bash or whatever, these kind of ghetto things you can do in Linux.
One of my favorite things to look at today is how much do you trust your tests? Right? We've put a ton of effort in Comma, and I've put a ton of effort in TinyGrad into making sure if you change the code and the tests pass, that you didn't break the code.
Yeah.
Now, this obviously is not always true, but the closer that is to true, the more you trust your tests, the more you're like, oh, I got a pull request and the tests pass, I feel okay to merge that, the faster you can make progress.
So you're always programming with tests in mind, developing tests with that in mind, that if it passes, it should be good.
And Twitter had
not that. So
it was impossible to make progress in the code base.
What other stuff can you say about the code base that made it difficult? What are some interesting sort of quirks, broadly speaking, from that compared to just your experience with Comma and everywhere else?
The real thing that I spoke to a bunch of, like individual contributors at Twitter, and I just asked them, like, okay, so like, what's wrong with this place? Why does this code look like this? And they explained to me what Twitter's promotion system was. The way that you got promoted at Twitter was you wrote a library that a lot of people used. Right? So some guy wrote an Nginx replacement for Twitter. Why does Twitter need an Nginx replacement? What was wrong with Nginx? Well, you see, you're not going to get promoted if you use Nginx. But if you write a replacement and lots of people start using it as the Twitter front end for their product, then you're going to get promoted, right?
So interesting, because like from an individual perspective, how do you incentivize? How do you create the kind of incentives that will lead to a great code base? What's the answer to that?
So what I do at Comma and at at Tiny Corp is you have to explain it to me. You have to explain to me what this code does, right? And if I can sit there and come up with a simpler way to do it, you have to rewrite it. You have to agree with me about the simpler way. Obviously we can have a conversation about this. It's not dictatorial, but if you're like, wow, wait, that actually is way simpler. Like the simplicity is important, right?
But that requires people that overlook the code at the highest levels to be like, okay.
It requires technical leadership you trust.
Yeah, technical leadership. So managers or whatever should have to have technical savvy, deep technical savvy.
Managers should be better programmers than the people who they manage.
Yeah. And that's not always obvious trivial to create, especially at large companies. Yeah. Managers get soft.
And and this is just, I've instilled this culture at Comma, and Comma has better programmers than me who work there. But, again, I'm like the old guy from Good Will Hunting. It's like, look, man, I might not be as good as you, but I can see the difference between me and you, right? And this is what you need. This is what you need at the top. Or you don't necessarily need the manager to be the absolute best. I shouldn't say that, but they need to be able to recognize skill.
Yeah. And have good intuition that's laden with wisdom from all the battles of trying to reduce complexity in code bases.
I took a political approach at Comma too that I think is pretty interesting. I think Elon takes the same political approach. Google had no politics. And what ended up happening is the absolute worst kind of politics took over. Comma has an extreme amount of politics, and they're all mine, and no dissidence is tolerated.
So it's a dictatorship.
Yep. It's an absolute dictatorship, right? Elon does the same thing. Now, the thing about my dictatorship is here are my values.
Yeah, it's just transparent.
It's transparent. It's a transparent dictatorship, right? And you can choose to opt in or, you get free exit, right? That's the beauty of companies. If you don't like the dictatorship, you quit.